All right, so let's get started on our pretzel rods. Now, one thing you'll want to need to do first, if you want the embellishment of the little butterfly, this is something that you'll probably want to make a day or two in advance so they have time to set up and get hard to where you can decorate your pretzel rod or anything else that you're making. Actually, they're so versatile, you can use them for just about anything. We're going to make these very much like we did the leaves for our cupcake toppers on our last video. Now, for the in little confetti butterflies like this, you want your fondant to be really thin for these because they're going to be small and need to be such that you can manipulate them as far as folding them or fluffing their wings or whatever you'd like. And I'm using a little bit different impression mat for these. You can buy these impression mats. Actually, I don't get them in the baking department. I find these in the clay and pottery department at Michael's and Hobby Lobby. They're just great for so many different things, and I have a bunch of them, and I use the fuzz out of them. So that's nice and thin. So you just take your little butterfly cutter, or if you want to use a little flower cutter, you can do that. I even have a teddy bear heart, any number of little teeny tiny cutters, and again you can get those in the pottery department of all places in the craft store. So you're just simply gonna just cut your butterfly, and again, like I mentioned before, just make sure your edges are smooth because some of these cutters can leave a little bit of a jagged edge, and we don't want that. We like it to be nice and smooth. So once you cut as many butterflies as you'd like, and I make a bunch at one time just because it's just so nice to just have them when you need them. So all I do once I get my butterflies cut out is I grab an egg carton. I always keep one in my stash because they're so versatile. They come in handy for a lot of different things. I just cut a piece of regular copy paper down to size and cut it in half or fold it in half. Make sure it has a nice crease. And I set it in here in my egg carton so it'll kind of stay in place and hold its shape. And then you just want to gently fold your butterfly and then set it in that crease so it'll hold its shape. And if you want to manipulate the wings so they look like they're just in different positions, this is the time to do that because once they get hard, they're set. They're done. So it's really that simple for the butterflies. I typically will make these a day or two in advance. That way they're ready when you are. And if you want a little extra bling, and I'm all about that, you'll just take some water and just cover the butterfly. You don't want too much because it'll get so sticky, it'll stick to your paper, but just enough to hold some of this sparkling sugar in place, kind of give it a little extra sparkly. Now this is kind of the thick sugar. You can buy real fine sugar which looks like glitter, but I just like that little extra bling. I don't know why I like to embellish so much, but that's the fun part. So basically, if you're making a butterfly for your pretzel rods, that's all there is to it. And again, I make a bunch in advance. I've made some purple ones here. I've mixed purple and blue fondant, and then I've got the yellow, orange and yellow, and I just put them in an airtight container. And then that way, when I need them, they are good to go, and these will last a pretty good while. And that's just something to do when you have some time and just want to do a little project, but nothing major. Just make some confetti butterflies or flowers or whatever you want. And I'm actually going to do a video at some point on how to make a bunch of little confettis like this, and also the stick confetti, because it really it's so expensive when you try to buy it, and it's so simple to make. There's no reason not to. So that's really all there is to the butterfly. So now we're going to get on and uh, go ahead and make our moss, and I'll be right back with you because I got to grab my food processor. Okay, so actually making the moss is the easy part of this project. Now I make mine in a food processor because for me it's just easier. If you don't have a food processor or you don't want to mess with that, you can buy graham cracker crumbs already ground up for you. So all you have to do is color them. So just pour the amount you think you'll need in a bowl, add your food coloring, and just stir it. And keep adding the food coloring and stir it until it's at the consistency and the color that you want. I'm not a big fan of graham cracker crumbs. It's nothing against it. It's just not my favorite. My favorite is the vanilla wafers. So that's what I use for my moss. I just put some in my little food processor here, and go ahead and add your green at this time. I will tell you, it takes quite a bit to get it at that mossy color. So this is where you want to add it. And I actually use a couple of colors. Now, you don't want to mix your crumbs to where they're just pulverized, but you do need to mix it enough to where it gives you the color, that your colors blend in well. Getting tangled up in my cord here. It's going to make a little noise, so I'm just going to pulse it. All right, I think that's about right. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Look at this. So it's got a little bit of crumbs to it. It has the color. So that took seconds. So a few more minutes. Hang in there with me. I'm going to go get the stuff to actually make the pretzel rods. I'll be right back. Okay, so now comes the fun part. We get to decorate our pretzel rods. We're all ready. So all you need is just your favorite pretzel rods that you can pick up in any grocery store. This is the chocolate that I use. I pick it up at Walmart. You can just break it off in chunks and just use what you need, and it tastes really good. You can also use just regular chocolate chips or the chocolate wafers that you can buy in any craft store. But again, this is my favorite. It tastes good and it's really easy to work with. So you're going to need what I use is a silicone brush to brush my chocolate onto my pretzel rods. It just gives it that, kind of gives it that wood grain effect. So what I'm going to do is just show you what to do while I share the WWJD portion of these videos. That's just, in my mind, that's as equally as important as anything we make, is just sharing those thoughts with you. So I have 3 children, 2 boys that are in their 40s, and then my youngest child, whose picture you saw in the introduction, upside down on the swing, is my daughter. She's in her mid-30s. And so this story happened about 33 years ago or so. And this is one of those stories that's funny now, but at the time it was rather alarming. And I'll never forget it as long as I'm lucid. It wasn't funny at the time, though. We had just left church, and we had a minivan, which is not the vans that they have today. It was one of those long vans with the seats in the middle and the big back. So the boys were in the back seat and doing what they always did. They were just constantly fighting and arguing about one thing or the other. So the little girl, my daughter, was in the back of the van, the very back. And there was just so much commotion in the vehicle, like there always was when we were all in there, just trying to get through church, get them ready, and get through the service without a lot of commotion. and then getting back in the van and trying to figure out what we do next. It was just always loud and proud. So anyway, I was just in my usual state at that point on Sunday morning, and with all the commotion that was going on in the van, suddenly I heard this little teeny tiny voice saying over and over, "I have popcorn in my ear." And it took a minute for me to realize what she was saying. But when it finally occurred to me, it was just like, stop the van. So we all got out and we looked, and there was popcorn in that child's ear. I could not believe it. I still can't believe it. And it's been 33 years. But there was popcorn embedded in her ear. So we finally, after trying to extricate it ourselves, we finally wound up at the emergency room so that they could get that popcorn out of her ear. I will never understand how that happened, but at any rate, that's how that child rolls. So the reason I'm even bringing that up with you is I find myself saying a lot, "Oh, God told me this," or "He spoke to me and mentioned that." And people kind of look at me with a side eye like, "God speaks to you?" Well, yes, He does. And I'm not special. He speaks to all of us. It's just that you have to really be honed in on that voice, just like I had to hone in eventually on my daughter's little voice and to hear it. When a lot of the times the voice that we hear is the one that's screaming at us. "You're ugly. You're stupid. Nobody likes you. You are not worthy." That is the enemy straight up talking to you. But unfortunately, that's the voice we all listen to because that one is the loudest. It tells us in the Bible that God's voice is not in the wind, it's not in the earthquake, it's not in the fire, it's just a small whisper. So you really have to be listening for that voice. But that's the one with which God is going to speak to you, the whisper. And he speaks to everybody. A lot of folks seem to think that God has this big booming voice like we heard in the old movie, The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. God kind of got loud and proud with Moses to make sure he got heard. And that's kind of our expectation as far as when God's going to speak to us. And to be honest with you, we're all so busy listening to the other voices and the other noises in our head that we couldn't hear God if we had to. I mean, we just have too many other things going on to hear that voice. So when He speaks to you, one good way to discern if it's God's voice that we're listening to or we're hearing is God is going to speak to you in your heart. It tells us in Proverbs that you should guard your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the issues of life. That says to me that that's where God's going to speak to you from. So that's the voice. You know, when we hear you need to follow your heart, that's why, because that's where God's going to speak to you from. So that's the voice you really want to home in and listen to. So if you're amongst those that thinks God doesn't speak to you, get still and block out all those other voices in your head and listen for that small whisper coming from your heart, because that's where God's going to speak to you. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So again, I'm just brushing it with the chocolate. You can put it on as thin or as lightly as you want. Just need to make sure you have enough to coat your pretzel to where whoever's eating it gets enough of that chocolate that everybody likes with a salty pretzel. And then just coat it with your moss. Now you don't have to use any confetti, it just gives it a little extra embellishment. And again, I'm just all over that. And it being so close to Easter, I found some pretty pastel beads here that I'm using for this. There's also the sparkly sugar. And again, it's my vision that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to make some confetti. And then just put a little dab of chocolate on your pretzel wherever you want that butterfly to live. And then just stick it on there. And you'll just set it on parchment paper until everything dries. So for display purposes, you can put it in a tall glass on your table or just set it on a pretty platter and just let it work on your display. So this is actually the last video for the woodland tablescape. We did our cake platter in the first video, our deer cake topper in the second one. In the last one, we did our cupcake toppers, so this will finish it up, our pretzel rods. And again, this will be a big hit because everybody loves those. So in our I forgot, if you have moss left over, you can just put it in an airtight container. I love these little lock and lock containers because they have that silicone ring, and the seals lock, so they're going to stay airtight. So any airtight container will be fine for your extra moss. You can sprinkle it on cupcakes. With Easter coming up, it'd be pretty to put that on a cupcake with a little chocolate bunny. There's just all kinds of things that you can do with the moss now that you've got it made. So now that we've got our tablescape done, we're just going to go in an entirely different direction for the next video. I think with Mother's Day and Easter being so close, we're going to make some really cute little hedgehog cupcakes. We're going to use our Russian tips for those. Although with everything that's going on in the world right now, and I don't want to be politically incorrect, but I call them my other country tips. So my name is Annette. I'm with Annabelle Lee Cakes, and I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Mwah.